library and trophy room.
Welcome to Santa Fe and the land of enchantment and my library study. I bought a house down the street, so I won't have to work at home anymore. My wife liked that because now I actually have to put on some clothes instead of just going down in my bathrobe and working all day. And here, of course, is Robbie the Robot from my favorite science fiction film, Forbidden Planet. And also we have here my collection of miniature figurines, toy soldiers. We have the whole cast of Game of Thrones here, Hodor and Bran, and Robert, Tywin. This is Sansa building a snow castle. Up there, there's a miniature me surrounded by semi-naked female figures. I never dreamed I would have this kind of mega global success. And it's pretty overwhelming. It's pretty overwhelming, but it's something that you could never have dreamed of and certainly never realistically expected. It's catching lightning in a bottle.
As a schoolboy, George Martin was writing superhero and science fiction stories for himself, his friends, and for comic fanzines. He still has some of the figurines which inspired those stories.
These are some of my first characters. Most of these are aliens made in the United States in the 1950s and sold in 5 and dime stores. They have no stories, so I made up stories for them, and this is some of my earliest writing. But I decided that these were a gang of space pirates. This guy was from Mars, Jarn. I decided his name was, he was the chief pirate. He was the head of the pirates. And this guy, who was supposedly from Orion, I couldn't figure out this weapon he was holding. It looked like a drill to me, this weird little weapon. So I decided he was the pirate torturer. He would use that drill to drill into your knees or your head and get you to spill your secrets. I was a bloodthirsty little kid even then. Other kids had cars and they got out of town. They took summer vacations down the shore or in the mountains. We couldn't afford to do any of that. We just stayed in the same old apartment in the summer. And I dreamed of being on other planets and living in other times. I was a lonely kid. I was the kid with his nose in the book. I was the last kid picked for games or things like that. I didn't, sports. I was no good at sports. So I spent a lot of time, sitting, reading a comic book, reading a science fiction book. Most of my initial exposure to many of the great works of English literature was through the Classics Illustrated comic books, whether it was, The Time Machine and War of the Worlds to at best Classics Illustrated or Shakespeare. They did Shakespeare, Hamlet as a comic book. But then I discovered Superman and Batman, and they were much cooler. So I was reading all the superhero comic books. So I think it was really comic books that made me interested in reading and in stories and in heroes.